So hi everyone. This is a wee video that's going to take us through a sort of an introduction to analysing structure in the close reading papers. This one's for the National 5 and the higher. The analysis of structure is also useful, obviously, though, in critical essays, and actually this is one of the really key things that if you can get your head around it can make a massive difference to the folio as well. So definitely worth paying attention to and worth trying to get right from the start. So a wee explanation and then an example that I'll show you as well. So what is sentence structure? In questions that ask about use of language, structure is an option, but there are so many possibilities with it, people sometimes get a bit lost. Basically, anything that isn't words is likely to be structure. Okay, so it's about how your sentences, paragraphs, or your whole text, which could be anything from an essay or a whole novel down to a poem, for example. It's about how they've been put together, how they've been constructed. And we look at things like, punctuation, so the use of colons or the use of brackets to create parenthesis, for example. We look at the length of things, a big long sentence or a wee short sentence, a big massive ongoing paragraph, or a wee short single sentence paragraph, for example. The repetition of things, the repetition of the start of a sentence, the repetition of the end of sentences, repetition of particular phrases, or even the repetition of other structures, all of that can come into play. And also the way in which things are linked together. So one of the things that you'll see actually in one of the sometimes quite specific close reading questions is about linking questions, and it's about the way in which we use like opening sentences of paragraphs to connect previous points with new points. So lots of different things that you can look at, but the thing to probably keep in mind is just, how a sentence, paragraph, or text is put together, not the stuff inside it, that's the words, but how it's been constructed. In terms of analysing that for the exam, we use the same quote and comment type structure that we use for word choice and imagery, although you won't always have to quote for the structure options. If, for example, the point you're going to make is that the third paragraph is absolutely massive because it's maybe 8 or 9 lines long, everything else is much shorter, you would just say, paragraph number 8 is extremely long or something like that. You don't need to quote something enormous. The same with if you're trying to quote a big, massive, long, complicated sentence, you would just give the clear reference, give the marker the line number and tell them what it is that you're referring to as clearly as you can. Quote the first couple of words or give them just a line number and a technique, something like that. The thing to remember is you're focusing on the effect of the structure, not the effect or the meaning of the words. And this is a wee bit tricky, this, for some people, but if you're going to comment on, for example, a list, you're not commenting on the individual things in the list. So, for example, somebody might give a list of, I don't know, their favourite football players, for example, or football players for a particular team that they think have been excellent. If you're going to analyse that, you'd be analysing the fact that you decided to write it out as perhaps a big, long, extended list, because a list in terms of style and structure suggests that something has got maybe lots of different options, or there's a big massive range of things that are available for it. And the comment would need to stay quite tightly focused on the choice to write things in a list, as opposed to, for example, to write lots of individual sentences. Okay, so it's still like the kind of point I made with word choice, it's still really all about choices. Why write that as a list and not as 5 or 6 individual sentences? Why make that paragraph so much longer than the rest? Why open that essay with a single sentence paragraph? All these kinds of things all matter, because they're decisions that have been made by writers, and those decisions will have some sort of intended consequence behind them. So let me just show you a wee example here. This isn't from a past paper. I've lifted this from an article that I found in the Guardian. And just because I saw it and I thought this is a good way to maybe demonstrate to you the difference between content and structure. So you can see the red underlined stuff, that is looking at the repeated structure. Okay, so sentence after sentence, and I mean that's a huge opening paragraph, and you could comment on that on its own, but sentence after sentence starting the same way. In 1955, in 1964, in 1968, in 1978, 1992, what that's doing is the repetition of structure is highlighting the repetition of events. It's reflecting that fact, and that's one of the things with structure, is that quite often we'll try to use structure to reflect things, which is clearly what's happening here. So by doing that, it shows you that, repeating the start in 1957, 1964, etc., 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 it shows you that this thing being discussed, i.e. the use of racism in political campaigning, happens again and again and again. So repeating the structure of the sentences suggests that the topic being looked at, or the thing being described, is being repeated over and over and over again. So the sentence structure mimics the overall rhetorical point being made. And it's similar with the colon as well. So colons are used to introduce things, introduce quotes. They can be used to introduce sort of consequences, explanations, all sorts of different things, lists even. But by that kind of introducing things, it's about showing a connection. So if you write a sentence at the end of the colon before it introduces a quote, for example, that quote is relevant to the sentence before. Same with if you introduce a list, the list will be some sort of explanation of the sentence that had come before it. In this case, that's what's happening here. So the colon is being used to introduce that sort of explanation type of thing. The point kind of being made by the author is that Nigel Farage's UKIP did so well in those European elections because he had defended and referenced that very famous Rivers of Blood speech. It doesn't need to say that explicitly. The sentence doesn't say, Nigel Farage's party did very well because, but the way that sentence has been structured allows the author to at least get that suggestion across, maybe without needing to quite be entirely explicit about it. Okay, so there'll be a couple of videos, obviously, a national 5 and a higher, and we'll look at some examples and work them through with you. But as you can see here, structure is something that has an impact on how we interpret passages, how we interpret paragraphs, all sorts of different things. So hopefully what you can see in the screen there is maybe a good sort of opening example to let you see why structure can be important, and we'll go on to have a look at some past paper questions and make sure you're feeling confident about those too. Thanks.